Puberty Blues is an iconic Australian novel written by Gabrielle Carey and Kathy Lett in 1979. It is based on the honest account of two best friends growing up in the surf culture of Cronulla during the 1970s. The novel depicts the story of two young girls trying to find themselves during adolescent culture and a coming of age, where despite the efforts of parents, the world of underage drinking, sexual experimentation, and even illicit drug use surged. As the audience can see in the next clip, the series explored quite controversial topics.
What if I don't know what to do?
When he's on you, just lie back. He'll show you what to do.
Tracey reckons she likes it.
She's lying. You ready?
Puberty Blues became a TV series in 2012 for Channel 10, an 8-part adaptation based on the 1979 novel. It explores the same narrative tropes as the novel, and for the purposes of this video analysis, we will be closely observing and analysing the 2012 television series. This analysis will explore how Puberty Blues as a TV series uses concepts of national mythology, landscape, and beach culture, and provides ochre-style conventions to create something authentically Australian. With references to other television shows, this video will discuss the different ways in which Australian television aims to capture audiences by creating something which is both intriguing and relatable. In Puberty Blues, the landscape is a pinnacle motif, which sets up the series for the plot of surfer gangs in Cronulla. Surf life amongst the teenage boys is important, and the girls in the series follow suit, aiming to be surfer girls in a hunt for belonging in their coming of age. Puberty Blues explores the Aussie beach culture throughout its representation of Australian identity. According to Ross Gibson, author of Camera Natura, Gibson describes how the beach landscape is not only a place for summer pleasure, but is an idefix which is critical in television series such as Puberty Blues, as it is subliminal to the plot. In other words, the beach itself is not merely a landscape, but is an important part of Puberty Blues in that it underlines many of the themes explored in the series. Themes to do with surfing, the appeal and emergence of Australian surfer gangs, and the lifestyle of those living along the beach. Colleen McGlowan's thesis on surfing nations, a surfing country, suggests that surfing and the surfer personality is not merely an activity, but represents the true blue Aussie, someone who goes against the conventions of a citizen influenced by white settlement and the proper mannerisms which came from England. Surfers represented freedom, a march of resistance to conformity. This conformity goes against the proper English society, arguably reflecting the Australian television industry's aims to separate themselves from England and to find their own identity. Cultural critic Craig McGregor further instills this notion of beach culture in Australian identity by describing beach location Byron Bay as a symbol of Australian culture and the place to be. Puberty Blues brings the teenage surfer gangs into the forefront of the show and explores a world that values surfing above all else. The distinct style and look of surfers legitimise surf culture worldwide. A rise in counterculture during the 1970s resulted in a specific look that defined a surfer. The male surfer displayed long hair, which blurred gender boundaries, and an anti-aggression and anti-achievement attitude. This is seen in Puberty Blues. This display of anti-achievement explores notions of laziness, a somatic motif that holds significant currency in Australian culture. Laziness is shown through the surfer's priorities, being purely for the surf and nothing else. The surfers of the Shire in Puberty Blues hold surfing at utmost importance and dedicate all their time on the beach, putting behind important things such as family, education and work.
Should we go to school? Reckon we already miss English? It's alright, I already speak English. So one more?
Thus, Puberty Blues could be compared to Samson and Delilah in the fact that Aboriginal people, like surfers, are socially unacceptable, in the fact that they're perceived as being useless and not wanting to aspire to have any work or to do things that fit white society. In this scene here, Delilah actually gets rejected in the fact that she doesn't have a proper job, walking around harassing people. In turn, the next scene, Samson is seen sniffing petrol. Thus, in ways, it is important to note that this notion of laziness perhaps refers to colonial settlement and reflects the Aboriginal people, whose cultural values do not adhere to Western society. To Aboriginal people, perceptions of time, accumulations of land and wealth, and productivity are not important. Thus, the surfer icon is a connotation that dates back all the way to white settlement, where the surfers are an ambiguous representation of Aboriginal people and their values. To further understand beach culture as a representation of Australian mythology, we take a look at Channel 7's soap opera Home and Away. Like Puberty Blues, the show builds its plots and scenes around the famous Summer Bay, an iconic narrative beach location. Without Summer Bay, the pretense of the entire soap would be completely different. Say if Home and Away were to be based in New York City, the soap might have perhaps depicted a more urban lifestyle and culture, focusing on themes such as the Bronx or the bustling city streets. Puberty Blues and Home and Away could be placed in comparison to shows that are set in the city, such as Australian TV series Offspring. You can see how the two shows can be juxtaposed to show that location has an important influence on the show's themes and style. Thus, Australian television aims to create its identity through signifying itself as a country with a beautiful beach landscape. It promotes its beach culture for national recognition and represents the beach as an aesthetic feature for Australian TV and cinema. In Home and Away and Puberty Blues, the cinematography uses the beach in an artistic way, with many establishing shots of the show depicting the scenery. In saying this, both shows are aesthetically beautiful, in keeping with this unified myth of a beautiful Australian beach landscape. Further exploring the beach as a landscape, we take a look at national broadcast, where writer Ross Gibson suggests that the beach is arguably an important Australian mythology and is displayed throughout Australian television content to create a sense of national connection. The beach is a symbol of the Australian and is shown proudly throughout our national broadcasts, right next to the likes of, say, the Australian AFL. Take a national broadcast such as the 2000 Sydney Olympics, where sunbathing, a motif to the beach icon, is depicted in the Australian opening ceremony of the Olympics. It's as if Australian identity wants to associate itself with beach culture. In conclusion to the landscape, Puberty Blues utilises beach culture to show that the Australian beach is a national hallmark. Like the Sydney Opera House, a kangaroo, AFL or cricket, the beach helps to define the Australian identity. Even the national anthem suggests a country which is bountiful in sea and beach life. The national anthem lyrics, "Our home is girt by sea," aren't merely just lyrics, but have been adopted in Australian television and used as a mythology to suggest that no other country is as beach-bound as Australia. In summary, we seek to claim the beach as our own, the way Europe uses culture and art as their own. Moving on to our next idea of further creating a sense of Australia, Puberty Blues untraditionally represents contemporary television in the ochre style. The ochre style is a celebration of the Australian and describes how we embrace the behaviour, the language, the slang and the mannerisms of the Australian people, thus providing another view of national identity in conjunction to the beach. Puberty Blues represents this realistic view of contemporary Australia, using relatable icons that aren't necessarily attractive, such as the all-round Aussie mum and dad, Aussie traditions such as the Chico roll, meat pies, beers and going to the local RSL. Whilst these motifs aren't pretty in nature, they relate themselves back to being Australian. These motifs create a comedic and recognisable feature to the series. The ochre genre does not represent quality and beauty in television, rather it represents a form of entertainment. It's about exploring the Australian culture. In conclusion, Puberty Blues opened up the eyes of many Australians to the realities of growing up in the surf in the 1970s. It successfully utilised the beach landscape and promoted this idea of an Australian identity by using ochre humour throughout the series.